Hi, I'm Philip Dale Smith, and I have a question for you. In fact, I have three questions for you. Number one, why is the Gettysburg Address the best known, the most memorized speech in the English language? Now, my grandson Ricky, when he was in school, would have said, "Granddad, that's easy. The teachers made us learn the thing." But there's something more behind it. What was there about that presentation that caused it to so grip the minds of the people that it became the gem that it has in English literature? Okay, that's question number one, and we'll get to an answer on that as we talk, I think. But I have another question or two for you. Number one, what is the most joyous week that you can remember? What is your happiest week? And then a second question, what is the saddest week? Well, the happiest week probably had to do with victory in some form. It may have been your team won the district championship, or it may be mom or dad returned from military service. It could have been any number of things. And the saddest week was probably a week of loss. And so think about those two questions, and then think about our nation. Our nation had one week that has never been duplicated. It was the week that began April the 9th, 1865. What happened on that day? Well, that's the day Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox. And so again, there was a mix of happiness and despair on the part of the North, on the part of the black people. There was elation, there was joy, and among some in the South, there was happiness that the war was over, but also there was despair that they had lost. And yet that week began on what was for many a high note. But on Friday of that week, something happened that turned that week into a week of ambivalence, of heartache and heartbreak and joy, elation and despair. At 9:30, a stealthy figure moved into the booth and shot Abraham Lincoln. The next morning at 7:22, the doctor who was attending him said, probably to himself as much as those gathered around the bed, as he crossed Lincoln's arms across his chest, he said, "He is gone." A few moments later, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton made a statement that rings down through the ages. He got up from the bedside and said, "Now he belongs to the ages." Walt Whitman was a great admirer of Lincoln, and he wrote a poem that I want to share with you, and it placed him among the great poets of the last half of the 1800s. It's called "O Captain, My Captain." And you can feel and you can hear that blend of happiness and sorrow, despair and gratitude woven into this poem. And here's the way it reads. "O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But, oh heart, 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 oh bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. Oh Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills, for you bouquets and ribboned wreaths, for you the shores are crowding, for you they call the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear Father, this arm beneath your head. My captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm. He has no pulse, nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells, while I in mournful tread walk the deck. My captain lies fallen, cold, and dead. And so Walt Whitman captured the despair and the joy. He captured the ambivalence of the feelings, the joy that the war was over, and the deep despair that the captain who had steered us through the troubled waters and safely into port was no longer at the helm. But Stanton, in his statement, captured a marvelous truth when he said, now he belongs to the ages. He belongs to us now. He looks down at us from Mount Rushmore. He looks at us from the memorial there in Washington. He looks at us when we pull out a $20 bill or when we hold up a penny. Why? Because this man captured so much that is so essential in regard to our nation. There's so much that we can learn from him. Love of people, love of the country, love of the founding fathers, love of the nation they created for us, love of the Constitution that they gave us, love of government guided by that Constitution. Those are all things that we treasure or should. And that leads me, by the way, to the first question I asked, and that was this: why is the Gettysburg Address the most memorized speech in the history of the English language? And it goes back to the fact that Lincoln covered some essentials. In fact, my daughter Lisa K. Howes and I were inspired in part to write the book, Mr. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, a back porch conversation, because of 12 things that Lincoln covered in that speech of less than 3 minutes. Little short phrases, but each of those phrases grabbed the mind of the people who heard him that day. And the people of that age that didn't have television, didn't have radio, they didn't have the opportunity to be visually impacted, but they had learned to listen. They listened to that speech, and when he spoke phrase after phrase that they could grip and that reached inside them, it gave a presentation with impact. And so we wrote the book based on the idea that Lincoln had 12 things to say. And we thought, how could we best present that? So we thought, if the night before he gave the Gettysburg Address, if Lincoln had had an opportunity to gather all the children who had come together for that occasion, the celebration of the cemetery there, if he had had the opportunity to gather them all together in the backyard of one of the homes in Gettysburg and could have sat on the porch and told them what he was going to say the next day, how would he have explained it? And so we have tried to imagine that scene and have taken phrase by phrase what Lincoln said, and based on what he said in other places, what he wrote and what he carried out in his life, we have tried to encapsulate those 12 points in a way that will help us to understand why that speech had the impact it had and why it continues to do so today. So I'd like to encourage you to get a copy of our book. Again, the name of it is Mr. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, And to make it easy, simply go to the website by that name, Mr. Lincoln's GettysburgAddress.com. And there you can get this recording that you've heard. You can also get a video of the book. You can order the print copy of the book when the book is available, and you can get an ebook right now. So let me encourage you to go to Mr. Lincoln's GettysburgAddress.com and get your free materials. And I hope you'll come back regularly, because we're going to be adding to this. And by the way, I'd like to hear from you. Who are some other people you'd like to hear from in history? Would you like to hear from Mr. Ben Franklin or Mr. Thomas Jefferson and that Constitution he wrote? Visit our site and get in touch with me, and we'll talk about and consider some of these things. So this is Philip Dale Smith saying, I'm glad I had a chance to talk with you and to share with you this poem and this thought about one of the greatest presidents, one of the greatest speeches that's been given on the North American continent.